Welcome back to On the Record. It's week 6 of the Karen Reed murder trial, and the drama did not slow down this week. The spotlight turned to science, cell data, and Reed's Lexus SUV. From expert reconstructions to emotional recordings, the courtroom became a battleground of facts, theories, and forensic doubt. The prosecution wrapped their case, but not before one final clip of Karen Reed that left the room holding its breath.
In the pre-dawn hours of a snowy January morning in 2022, the lifeless body of Boston police officer John O'Keefe was discovered face up in the front yard of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. A dedicated cop and beloved uncle, O'Keefe's sudden violent death sent shockwaves through the community. His girlfriend Karen Reed, a finance professor, was quickly cast from grieving partner to accused killer. Prosecutors claim she dropped him off at the home of a fellow officer after a night of drinking and then struck him with her SUV while backing up and left him to die in the cold. They point to broken taillight fragments, a cracked rear light on her vehicle, and expert testimony putting together a digital timeline. But Reed's defense tells a different, darker story of a brutal beating inside that house, a cover-up, and a law enforcement conspiracy to frame Karen Reed. As the courtroom drama unfolds, the jury must weigh the evidence and figure out how John O'Keefe died.
Day 21 focused on accident reconstruction expert Dr. Judson Welcher, who broke down data from Karen Reed's 2021 Lexus SUV. He highlighted a three-point turn near Cedar Crest Road and a reverse maneuver at 34 Fairview, the scene of the crime, both lining up with key timestamps from John O'Keefe's phone. Welcher also recreated the alleged 5 a.m. garage bump as Karen Reed backed out of John O'Keefe's garage, calling it gentle contact with no damage, just a scuff. He even bought the same Lexus SUV model to test its capabilities. To illustrate impact, jurors were also shown a demonstration. A slow-moving vehicle just 2 miles per hour was enough to knock someone off balance. Welcher suggested that could account for the arm injury found on O'Keefe's body.
If you could now begin and tell us how you started your investigation.
Sure. So on September 23rd, I had an opportunity to come out. Mr. Brandon, was the first time I ever met you on that day, I believe. And I had received material before that. And what you see here is, this is my inspection of Miss Reed's vehicle. So what you see is, again, I mentioned looking underneath the bumper. So we wanted to see what, if anything, was damaged on the corner.
Doctor, when you were looking for damage on the previous slide, did you find any damage to that lower right red taillight?
No, there was no damage to the taillight. Additional cell phone data that we had is that we knew there was a three-point turn made when the Lexus passed Fairview on Cedar Crest, pulled into a driveway, and made a three-point turn.
Dr. Welcher, did you determine how long after the first trigger, that three-point turn, that the second trigger occurred?
Yes. 11.2 occurred about 8 minutes after.
After the three-point turn?
Correct. So each one of these little hash marks, different color, represents 10 feet. The red lines show the extent of motion. So that's the vehicle, the Lexus pulling forward, and then it accelerated in reverse, past its initial starting position.
Regarding the first triggering event, 1162-1, do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty, what type of event the first triggering event was?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow that.
The actual trigger was excessive rearward acceleration. The event was during the course of a three-point turn.
Do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty, as to the type and triggering event of the second event, 1162-2?
Yes.
Could you share your opinion with the jury?
The triggering event was high throttle opening in a transition to reverse. It's a forward motion followed by a higher speed rear motion. And at the end of the trigger event, you're still at 74% throttle.
And finally, regarding this part of your analysis, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty as to whether the defendant's Lexus was decelerating, accelerating, or remaining the same at the end of that data captured at the triggering event 1162-2?
It was accelerating at 74% throttle.
Considering all the data and analysis that you did you come to a conclusion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether the right rear taillight of Miss Reed's Lexus was broken or damaged during the contact with Mr. O'Keefe's car at around 5:07 a.m. on January 29, 2022?
That impact did not break or crack that taillight.
Is that your opinion?
That's my opinion.
Is that to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty?
That's to a high degree of engineering certainty. What I've done is I've painted the Lexus right rear taillight with what's called grease paint, and then I have backed up sideways, side shuffled into the Lexus with my arm out to see what the damage pattern looks like. Just kind of me walking slowly sideways into it, the approximate location of the taillight, and I'll line it up with the broken taillight in a second, lines up with the approximate location of the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's arm.
Sir, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm and forearm regarding its orientation relative to the broken taillight on the defendant's Lexus?
The location and orientation of the laceration on John O'Keefe's right forearm and arm are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right taillight of the Reed 2021 Lexus LX 570.
Based on all the evidence you considered, could you share with the jury what your opinion is to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. O'Keefe on January 29, 2022, around 12:32 a.m.?
Yes, based on the totality of the evidence, DNA, everything I've talked about, that is consistent with that happening. With a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that is what happened.
Day 22 got tense and the courtroom saw sparks fly as the Commonwealth's crash expert took some heat on Cross. Dr. Judson Welcher, the prosecution's accident reconstructionist, returned to the stand, but the judge drew limits. He could say the crash was consistent with Reed hitting O'Keefe, but not that she did hit him. That's for the jury to decide. Now, once testimony got rolling, Welcher said Reed's Lexus didn't log a crash that night, but there's a catch. He said the vehicle only records collisions with other cars, not people. That opened the door for the defense attorney, Robert Alessi, to pounce, and that's exactly what he did. Alessi spent the remainder of the day poking holes in Welcher's analysis, questioning whether he had enough data to reach any real conclusions. Welcher tried to stand firm, stating the test showed her SUV could cause the kinds of injuries found on O'Keefe's arm and hand. Still, it added another layer of confusion over who used what and when. As the Commonwealth neared the end of its case, the defense says they're ready to flip the script. Karen Reed has promised a stronger, more robust defense than what jurors heard in the first trial. So buckle up, this retrial is far from over.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty in whether the damage to the defendant's Lexus is consistent with a collision with Mr. John O'Keefe on January 29th, 2022 at around 12:32 a.m.?
So there's been two potential theories that I've seen on that issue. One is a glass was thrown at the rear of the vehicle and shattered it. The second one was an impact to the arm. If the impact is basically more than approximately 8 miles an hour, it will likely break the taillight lens.
Do you have an opinion whether, based on the data and based on the physical damage and your testing, whether that is consistent with a collision or a impact with Mr. John O'Keefe?
It is consistent with a collision as long as it's greater than approximately 8 miles an hour.
Do you have an opinion whether it's consistent with an impact or collision with Mr. John O'Keefe on January 29, 2022 at around 12:32 a.m.?
With that caveat, yes.
In your testing, did you consider, or do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty, whether John O'Keefe's injuries on his arm, inevitably in the back of his head, are consistent with being struck by a Lexus identical to the defendant's Lexus on January 29, 2022?
Yes,
What's your opinion?
that it is.
You stated with respect to your conclusions early on in your direct testimony and your analysis that you don't, and I think I've got it quoted, you don't have a dog in the fight. Is that what you said, sir?
I did.
And that you, quote, don't care, end quote, about the outcome. That's what you made a point of saying in the beginning,
That is
correct?
100% correct.
Now you simply follow the data. Is that correct?
I tried to do that.
You try to do that.
I'm not perfect, so
Okay.
I do my best. I believe I've done it here.
Isn't one of the questions, and maybe one of the first questions, how did this happen?
No, that's not one of the first questions. One of the first questions is, where's the damage? What are the injuries? What's the evidence? What black box or text stream data do we have? What physical evidence was at the scene? So that is certainly not one. It is a question, but that question is at or near the end.
Isn't every one of the questions that you just mentioned part of the data gathering?
Correct, but,
Okay.
but when you're gathering data, you're always asking yourself questions along the way, like, what is this? Where did it come from?
But you would agree that for you at least some point, it's how did this happen, correct?
Yes.
And don't you ask that question to come up with hypotheses?
I generally have many working hypotheses as I'm working on the case, and then as the evidence comes in, I'm applying that to my hypotheses and either accepting or rejecting the hypotheses based upon the factual information.
When you visited 34 Fairview, did you go into the garage at 34 Fairview?
No, I actually didn't set foot on the property.
You didn't set foot on the property.
No, I stayed in the street. It's my understanding there were new owners.
Did you consider the scene limited to the road?
So the access I had was to the road. The laser scanners and the photographs will extend further, but I didn't have access to the interior of the house.
Oh, so you didn't access the entire scene, correct?
In my opinion, I did access the entire scene. I didn't physically step 7 feet onto the grass to the point of rest, but I stood and photographed where that was. I didn't want to trespass.
Where did you understand the body of Mr. O'Keefe was located?
I know it was 7 feet in from the grass. I've seen cruiser cameras showing people around a body. It's slightly north and slightly south and a little bit west of the flagpole.
But you didn't access that part of the scene that you just described, correct?
I absolutely did. I took photographs of it. I didn't trespass and stand at that exact location, but I stood right there. We scanned the whole thing. The scanner uses a laser beam that goes out, 150, 200, 300 feet. So we scanned all that stuff.
How long do you believe the arm needs to maintain contact with the taillight after, under your theory, it breaks to produce those types of wounds that you say came from a taillight?
We don't have enough information to determine that.
Right.
Back on the stand on day 23 was the Commonwealth star accident reconstructionist Dr. Judson Welcher to finish cross-examination, but the defense didn't get everything they wanted. Judge Cannoni denied their request to question Welcher about Trooper Joe Paul's reconstruction report and about the medical examiner's autopsy findings. That could have opened a whole new door for the defense, but that door stayed shut. And with that, after 23 days, 38 witnesses, and countless hours of gripping testimony, the Commonwealth rested its case in the Karen Reed retrial. But they didn't close out quietly. The Commonwealth played one final clip of Karen Reed, an emotional moment where she wondered aloud whether she might have accidentally hit John O'Keefe with her SUV.
You have no basis as you sit here today to conclude that the glass on the bumper came from a drinking glass connected to Mr. O'Keefe, do you?
Well, we have a picture of a broken glass at the scene, so I wouldn't say we have no basis. We don't necessarily have enough to conclude it's from it, though.
That Ring camera was utilized as part of your laser scan process, correct? It was used.
So you're confusing laser scan and photogrammetry. The video, the laser scanners are together used in the photogrammetry. The camera and the laser scans are not used necessarily with each other.
Let's talk about some other differences with regard to cameras and Ring cameras. Different Ring cameras can have different levels of distortion, correct?
Potentially.
Cameras, well, are you saying that all Ring cameras have the same level of distortion?
No, but again, they're mass produced, so you could have some that have the same exact distortion. You could have some that have different.
And you don't know the comparative distortion between what I'm just going to now refer to as the old Ring camera that was there January 29, 2022, and the camera that you saw on October 2024, which I'll refer to the new camera. You don't know the difference in the distortion between those cameras as you sit here today, do you?
So we know enough information that if the distortions had been different, our errors would have been too high. And so the fact that our errors are within acceptable, or what's called an RMS error, we know that the distortions are similar enough to give us accurate measurements.
Sir, that is speculation. That is not data. That is not a measurement. You didn't measure the distortion, sir, did you? If the cameras, you didn't have the old camera to do it.
We didn't, but we had images from the old camera, and then when we get images from the new camera and solve those camera properties and then overlay data from the old images to the new images with the point clouds, if that distortion is too great, we will have too high of errors in our project, which is why I showed the error report from the photogrammetry process to show that we have checked for that and documented that our errors are in acceptable range so that we have confidence in our results.
Wouldn't knowing the difference in the models be relevant? That's all I'm asking. Wouldn't it be relevant to your analysis of reconciling the differences to them? Wouldn't it be relevant?
No.
So you think the different models are irrelevant to any process you occasioned at one? It's irrelevant.
So the analysis of the video itself is more important than the models?
I'm not asking if it's more important. I'm just asking, would it be relevant?
No, I don't believe it'd be relevant.
You were asked some questions about the Ring video from Meadows, which was John O'Keefe's home. And you were asked whether you're aware if the cameras had changed over time.
Correct.
The fact that the camera was replaced, does that any way affect your opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about your conclusions relative to that touching between the cars?
Absolutely not. It would have shown up as increased error when we overlaid the point clouds onto the photos or the point clouds onto the video. If it was an error, it would have showed an error.
Do you have any concern whatsoever that any of the information from the scan is in any way tainted, compromised, or inadequate?
That would be very hard to do. You literally press a button and stand there and watch it, and the laser does its thing. So I have absolutely no reason to disbelieve it. Additionally, again, if it was messed up, once you laid it over on top of the photograph, it would show the difference. So no, the data's fine.
Is there any evidence whatsoever that you've seen that any parts of your presentation were photoshopped?
No.
The Commonwealth story is told, and now on day 24, the defense begins theirs, starting with a digital forensics expert who aimed to unravel the Commonwealth's data. He analyzed reports from experts Judson Welcher and Shannon Burgess, testifying that no evidence showed John O'Keefe's phone locked before Karen Reed's vehicle was put in reverse. He challenged Burgess's timeline, arguing that the trigger events were recorded at the end, not during the incident. Now on cross, the defense's expert admitted that he had not conducted independent testing, lacked mobile forensics expertise, and was not claiming Reed's SUV didn't hit O'Keefe, only that the data interpretations were flawed.
Did you create a PowerPoint for clarity's sake in March of 2025?
Yes,
Did you provide that to us?
I did.
Following your presentation of the PowerPoint to us, at some point did you receive from Mr. Burgess an amended report, an amended PowerPoint?
I received an amended PowerPoint by Mr. Burgess, not from him, though, from you.
Explain to the court and for the jurors, what were the main differences that he changed in the May 2025 report?
Contrasting it with the original
Correct.
report. In the original report, he laid out some methodologies for correcting the clock using phone calls that were shared between the vehicle and Mr. O'Keefe's phone. And in the supplemental report, he moved away from the phone call analysis and moved to attempting to align the clocks using a shared maneuver between the vehicle and the phone.
What was the shared maneuver?
It was a 3-point turn.
Do you know where the 3-second conclusion came from in Mr. Burgess's report?
That came from the testing that Aperture conducted with the exemplar Lexus that they purchased.
Was there anything in the report that indicated testing, this type of exact testing on Miss Reed's actual Lexus?
No.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not all Lexuses, at least of this make and model and year, would have the exact same 3-second delay? Or could that be different?
It could be different. In their testing, they only tested one exemplar vehicle. So I think there was a solid foundation that the exemplar that was used exhibited this 3-second delay. It was a very close match in terms of part numbers and software versions to Ms. Reed's Lexus, but without any kind of testing of, let's say, a second vehicle, a second exemplar, we wouldn't know, we wouldn't have any basis to say it must be 3.
Is there a data recorder on the Toyota SUV that we've been talking about, that 2021 Toyota SUV 570, that's designed to record impact?
Yes.
What did the data recorder indicate, if anything, related to any impact on January 29th, 2022?
There were no recorded events whatsoever on the ACM.
Did the vehicle control history record whether there was any history of a collision on that car, ever?
No.
Sir, are you trying to offer an opinion suggesting that Miss Reed's Lexus never hit John O'Keefe on January 29, 2022?
No, sir.
Are you offering an opinion that Miss Reed's Lexus never got in a collision before?
The way I stated it was none of the prior events were triggered by a collision.
You are not suggesting to this jury that Miss Reed's Lexus did not ever get in a collision before?
No.
You're just saying that there's no data on the text string to suggest a collision.
Specifically, none of the events were triggered by a collision.
Do you know at the end of this triggering event, that 10-second window of data, do you know what happened with the defendant's Lexus after that 10-second of data?
No,
You have no idea, right?
I don't.
Did you ever yourself, not watch someone else do it, did you ever download or obtain data in this case?
No.
Did you ever test Miss Reed's car?
No.
Did you ever get an exemplar vehicle to run any tests?
I did not.
Did you ever do any actual testing in this case?
No.
And so your role is to look at other people's work and offer opinions and criticisms, basically.
And provide some clarity to the work, but generally, yes.
Clarity for who? Who asked you to provide clarity?
My clients in this case.
You what?
Mr. Jackson.
The defense has the floor now, and they've promised to shake things up. As new experts take the stand and the counter-narrative unfolds, one thing is clear. The battle over what happened on Fairview Road is entering a whole new phase. I'm Cody Thomas, and as always, thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time we go back on the record.